Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I thought we'd take a deep breath. I haven't been on lately. I went out and did some fishing for some bluefish and albacore, and wound up with some porgies and sea bass and the like, and back at the shop. And we're going to take two projects that I'll share with you today, but the one I wanted to work on was a Shimano bait runner. It was just sent in to me, and it's been beached. It went underwater, and the problem with that is on the ocean side you get a lot of sand, and you can actually see the sand coming right out at the bottom here of the rotor already, and the performance is very sluggish for a bait feeder, particularly a Shimano, but otherwise this reel is in nice condition. So I thought I would go over with you the plan of attack, how these things become infiltrated with sand and what you have to do to clear the sand. So on a plan of attack, almost all the time, even if I'm familiar with a reel, I'm going to want to go out and pull the schematic, and this one was available at Mike's Reels. The schematic is also available at E-Replacement Parts, and it's probably available on the Shimano website, although I haven't checked there. And that shows you not only the exploded view, but all of the parts. So interestingly enough, this reel came with a screw from somewhere, and we're going to use this parts list and a schematic to figure out where that screw goes to the best of our ability. Okay, so how does a reel get infiltrated with sand when it gets beached to begin with? So let's just take a moment and go over that. So the almost obvious one is the top drag system. So that's going to take water, and a lot of manufacturers have done a nice thing with the top waters now. They're putting in some rubber-coated washers on top and some other things to block the sand from coming in here. But this is the one that takes the beating a lot. And again, you can see some minor sand. Here's your rubber washer. But right off the rubber washer is the first drag of the metal system. So almost invariably, when you get a beached reel, these drags in the spool set are going to have sand in it. Now, we're not just talking about the sand here that you can see that's visible, right? That looks like you went to the beach and you just grabbed a handful of sand. What we're really talking about is microscopic sand, and that's the biggest issue in trying to restore or repair a sanded reel, is that you can't see it. It's very fine sand that washes in and out with the water. So the first plan of attack that you need to do when you're looking at repairing a reel that has gotten swamped is that you know that the spool and the drag systems probably have got a good deposit in there. If your manufacturer doesn't have this and it goes right to the metal, chances are there's more of that. Sometimes this rubber does stop some of it, so to a lesser degree you may have that in there. So you want to think spool first. We're going to take the spool off, and it's kind of clean inside, which is a good thing. So what we find here then is the next place that the water will come in, it'll go underneath the spool, come into the router, and again it'll ride down the shaft, although the shaft is pretty tight. But underneath here and underneath the rotor, and you can see here, and that's plenty of room for sand and water to get into, we got a whole structure going on here. So underneath that first cover then is a couple of washers and a bearing in the rotor. And then we've got the spool shaft comes through. That's what I'm saying, the water can get in that way. But look at all this stuff in here that's just under the lip of the rotor. So you have the anti-reverse bearing, you have the pinion gear shaft bearing, you have the pinion shaft, and then that's a little seat that goes inside. So what happens? Water comes under the rotor, infiltrates this assembly, and many times these bearings can't even be cleaned out, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Infiltrates and gets into these bearings, then travels down the pinion shaft and into the body. And then the body is obviously where it catches all. And in the body then, you're looking at bearings on both the non-handle side plate as well as the handle side plate, and all of the mechanisms to trip the bait feeder mechanism in this case. And if you don't have the bait feeder, that's fine, but you'll find sand gets into the body, and you look at it, and on the front end of it, it says, geez, that's pretty well protected. How in the world would you know, how in the world would sand get in there? Well, it gets in there under the rotor, and again, gets under here too, in that anti-reverse dog override switch. So we're going to go and find out just exactly what's in there when I go to the repair. But let's talk about the repair then before we go much further. So what do, right? Well, at the end of the day, all of this stuff is going to look, this reel is going to look this way, because you really got to get down to all the pieces and parts of this. But as a starting point, what I like to do first and foremost is take a hairdryer and open, with the body open, is, you know, to have the side plate off, right? Have these gears exposed, have the rotor off, have this stuff exposed, have the shield off of the spool and get that off. I like to take a hairdryer and make sure that the reel is as dry as possible, because any lingering moisture is going to hold that particulate in the sand itself. So I'll do that, but you won't see me do that on this workbench, and that's kind of why I was explaining what we'll do here. You want to do it away from the workbench because, quite honestly, if you blow out the dust, if you blow out the sand, and it gets on your desk, then the next time you go to make a repair, you've got that residual sand laying around, and it's liable to be caught up on the next piece or part as you go to reinstall on maybe the same reel or a different reel. So the first thing to do when we have enough exposed area, I'm going to use a hairdryer. I'm going to use it at high heat, high speed blow. It's going to dry the reel and it's going to blow out some of that sand. The next thing that we're going to do then is we're going to get down to the pieces and the parts. But before that, I guess one step in between there. After I've blown it out, then I'm going to give it a thorough wash bath. And what I'm going to do there, just go to my tap and just hit it with the full speed that the water has. So hopefully that'll wash away some particulate as well. Let the reel dry. Then we're going to start taking the pieces and parts off the reel. So most of the time, we will use something like a microfiber towel or a paper cloth or a Q-tip or a wire brush, and we're going to make sure that all of these pieces and parts are clean to the best that we can do. Now, the one fear that I have with this is that when sand gets into bearings, like the anti-reverse bearing, the bearing here, the side plate bearings, and so on, if the bearings are not sealed bearings, and I haven't seen what these are yet on the inside, if they're not sealed bearings, in all probability, they're going to need to be replaced. That would be my guess is what's going to happen here because of the anti-reverse bearing. We'll see what happens with the three bearings, the one for the pinion gear and the two for the side plates. Those almost invariably need to be replaced. You can flood them out with a penetrating oil. You can try some other things, but at the end of the day, most of the time, if that grit is embedded in the tracks of that bearing, that's nothing good. The other thing about this too is when salt water gets into a reel, it tends to erode the lubricants. So I'm not surprised if I find out that a lot of this sluggishness is due to the fact that the water came in there, took away the overall lubricating properties and just left some sludge. And here's an example of that. I'm just going to take a paper towel here. You notice I don't have my gloves on or anything. But here's what's on the shaft at the moment. So that's telling me a couple of things. One is that the lubricant is now black. It shouldn't be black. It should be blue or something to that effect. It's black. I can't tell if that's metal particulate in here. It may very well be. You can still see a little bit of residual on the shaft here. But that may be metal, and that metal may be because the sand is in there grinding away at the pinion gear, grinding away at the bearing, or grinding away at the main gear. Because remember, this shaft travels all the way down through the body of the reel here. So that's not a good sign. That's what happens when salt water gets in. It takes away the lubricating properties. It facilitates the evaporation of the oils and the greases, and that all is bad news in terms of trying to make this stuff work from a relube. So most of the time, what I tell a customer is that we're probably going to wind up replacing the bearings in this reel. We'll do our best to clean it up. There are no guarantees, but we're going to give it a shot. So I just thought I would do this video for those of you that may have gotten a reel that is swamped. You'll be able to see me do most of this as I go ahead and prepare this thing for disassembly and cleaning and so on. But that's a process that takes some time, more time than I have in the YouTube video. So again, you can see the sand is here. That's never a good sign with what will be inside. But I'll report back to you. I'll show you what we were able to do on this one. Hopefully we'll be able to clean it up and put it back into service. I also know there's a couple of folks out there that have always asked, they're always curious about how do I service the bait feeder. So maybe I'll try and do something along that way as well. The bait feeder, of course, is a reel that's got the 2-drag system on it. It's got the typical top drag system that we're all familiar with, whether you have a bait feeder reel or not. Just put this button back on. Maybe I'm going to put it back on. Well, there we go. So as you tighten this down, that's going to tighten the spool down. And that's a traditional one, right? So if you just have a reel like this, that's not a bait feeder, just tightening this down is going to give you the drag when you're fighting the fish. That's the purpose of the top drag here. But it also has the rear drag here. So the rear drag, when you're in bait feeder mode, that's going to determine the level and the detail in terms of spinning freely on the release without tripping your bail, right? So it's just going to let you run it out, and we'll see how well we do there. So I've got this down. We should be in pretty good stead there. Oh, that's why. Silly me. There you go. So now you're tight on that, and then if you lessen it up, of course, then it'll spin more freely as you release. So that's going to be the project that we have here. That's the release without doing this on the bait feeder. Okay, so that's going to be the project. There's going to be a total disassembly. We're going to use a hair dryer on the front end of this thing to try and blow as much of that out as we can. If you have compressed air, that's another way to do it after you're certain that the reel is dead dry. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to disassemble it. We'll follow the schematic here to make sure we have all of the pieces and parts in the right place. Once it's as clean as we can, we're going to test those bearings. If the bearings need to be replaced, they will be replaced. And then we're going to reassemble and make sure it has the right amount of lubrication on all of the appropriate parts to put this thing back into service. So that's the plan of attack here. If you've had a swamped reel, you should be thinking similarly and understanding just how all that water got in here, how the sand is lodged, and how even though you can see some sand here, the dangerous sand is the stuff that you can't see that's hiding beneath the surface and possibly in those bearings. So with that, I just thought I would share that with you, since some people have asked. Like I said, we'll get back and we'll work on this, and we'll try to help you along with that as well and show you how a bait feeder is put together. But I did want to let you know that we're back from fishing. We got a project here that we're going to work on, and we'll share that with you shortly. Speaking of projects, there's this project, right? I'd asked for comments about whether I should use the pieces and parts off of the Mariner 49 to either make a conversion to a 501 Jigmaster or clean this one up and put it back in for the shark season. Somebody came along and painted both sides of it. So we're going to go ahead and put this one back together. The reason for that is I can't find a spool, the 501 spool, and the ones that I've found online, folks are asking a king's ransom for. But this one's a mess, but you'll see this week that I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go put this one back together and make it worthwhile for an upcoming shark fisherman who really doesn't care too much about looks. All right, so this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I appreciate you watching, and stay tuned, and we'll see more about this bait runner and about the Pen 49. Thank you for watching.